我々はどこへ向かうのか。
この栄えある作戦を遂行するために
始動させよ。
行くぞ。
僕たちが失敗したらそれで人類は終わる。
無理だ、勝ち目なんかねえんだよ。
守るべきものを捨てれば強くなれる。
こんなところで死ぬな。
Hello, and welcome to Film Rant. Some of you will have been waiting for this one, Attack on Titan Part 2, End of the World, again directed by Shinji Higuchi. Before I want to get into this, I just want to say how surprised I am that my review of Part 1 of this two-parter is, at the time of writing this, my most viewed video by far, so thanks to everybody who has watched that or any of my other videos. As with Part 1, I've aimed to go into Part 2 as blind as I can. In Part 1, I was completely blind, having not read any of the manga or seen any of the anime. I still haven't done either, but I have learned a little about the franchise from the comments on my Part 1 video. Still though, consider this review as coming from somebody who knows pretty much nothing about Attack on Titan. As usual, I'll go into spoilers from here on out, so if you haven't seen Part 1 or Part 2 and care about spoilers, please see the movies before watching this review. Now, I'll not go into detail on Armin, Eren and Mikasa again, as I already covered their characters in Part 1. There is some things to mention though. Han's got a lot more screen time in Part 2 and she becomes an instantly more lovable character. It's irrelevant that she's crazier than a shithouse rat, she just delivers some good comic relief. She starts dripping like a fucked fridge whenever she gets her eyes on some pre-war weaponry or witnesses explosions. Even in the final shots of the movie we see Eren and Mikasa hand in hand and Armin and Sasha cuddling while Hans affectionately cradles an RPG. Attack on Titan is fairly well known for having some interesting characters, that's made evident with Tatey McTatey face here, but I loved Hans in Part 2. I got a metric fuck ton of comments on my Part 1 video where people were going acker about Armin not being an interesting character. He is somewhat swept to the sidelines in Part 1, but have no fear, Armin is here, in Part 2 at least. Armin basically takes the lead in Part 2 whenever Eren is injured or not present. Armin stands up for Eren, often risking his life, and delivers some rousing speeches to spur the Survey Corps on. He also becomes a much more effective fighter, and I actually cared about him by the end. So I gather Armin is not totally loyal to his anime or manga counterpart, but he at least comes into the fray a bit more in this part. The character that really comes out of the woodwork though is Shikishima. In the beginning we see Eren get abducted by another sentient titan, much like the one Eren transforms into. When we next see Eren, he's locked in a room with Shikishima. He claims he followed the titan that abducted Eren and saved him. Well, that's a serious amount of horseshit. I never bought that for a second, so it came as no surprise when we found out that Shikishima can also turn into one of those giant motherfuckers at a moment's notice. Okay, we have something interesting here. We now have two titans on the same side. To add to this, Shikishima tells Eren about the origin of the titans and why they exist, which I'll get into later. Throughout the early stages of this movie, Shikishima displays he's the strongest fighter and most politically educated out of the entire Survey Corps. He plans to wipe out the oppressive government regime with the help of some explosives he stole, and he wants Eren and the rest of the group's help. When the group learned that Shikishima's plan to overthrow the government would result in many innocents dying, they turned on him. It was very interesting to see Shikishima, arguably more powerful than Eren in both Titan and human form, straddling the line between the two sides. He's a useful ally against the government for the Survey Corps, but he's also very dangerous himself. I just love the idea of Eren having a powerful ally who is also his enemy. As well as these individual characters standing out, I found that in general this movie made me care about the characters more. Those who survived the battle at the end of Part 1 seemed to band together into a sort of mercenary group. You could call them a fellowship. Okay, let's not get carried away here, this is nowhere near Lord of the Rings, but you get the same sense of togetherness in this group. And for me, I found myself wanting them all to survive and look out for each other. I didn't have that so much in Part 1. I'm not really sure what happened in Part 2, I think it's simply that there was less characters to deal with, and we were allowed to see them banter with each other for a bit before the shit hit the fan. So now we'll get on to the script. I'll begin with arguably the most controversial aspect of the script, specifically for the anime and manga readers. Attack on Titan Part 2 explains where the Titans come from and why they exist, which is something I know the anime is yet to tackle. I'm interested to know what you guys think of the big reveal, so leave a comment below, but I personally thought it was very good. But I'm a filthy casual, so take my opinion with a pinch of salt. But as an outsider, I thought the Titans' purpose and creation was something I could get on board with. Titans were created by genetic experiments and eventually started cropping up randomly all over the world. Wars were fought to try and control and eliminate them, but eventually the world just grew paranoid over who could possibly be a Titan, and eventually we ended up with the sole civilization we have in the movie, protected from the rest of the world by walls. I can get on board with that. It's sort of like building a bunker to shield yourself from nuclear warfare and never leaving, which leads me on to Shikishima's theory about the government. He reckons that the ruling government of the community work in cohesion with the Titans so they can manipulate and control the people through fear. The term cattle is thrown around a lot in the movie, and that's exactly what our characters are up until they decide to rise up. Furthermore, it's mentioned that the government operate on a birth control law, whereby each person is only allowed to have one child. At least I think it's only one child. Sound like something you've heard before? So basically, Attack on Titan is about Japanese heroes rising up against China. And that's a big fucking move to make. I can't speak from personal experience as I've never been to China nor know anybody who's lived there for a substantial amount of time, so I can't say for sure what life is like in China, but still it's no secret that human rights in China are a strong discussion topic worldwide. We discover about halfway through part 2 that the Titans aren't the real enemy, they're just a fear weapon. The real enemy is the oppressive government that restrict the human rights of the inhabitants, including birth control, and Shikishima has a plan to overthrow the government by turning their own weapons against them. It's not just China that allegedly use fear tactics to control their population either. Arguably every government in the world has been accused of this at some point. I didn't expect Attack on Titan to get somewhat political in the slightest, so I was very impressed that they decided to take this kind of route. It certainly gave the film a bit more depth and portrayed a message. Will it cause an international movement? Nah, probably not, but it's at least saying something. It has a voice. Following on from that political plotline, going back into the film itself, I have to say I'm not entirely sure on what the governor's plan was. Shikishima says that they use the Titans as a form of population control. Every once in a while they'll let some in to wipe out a bit of the herd. They then deploy the brave people who want to take out the Titans on suicide missions as they're seen as potential threats to the government because of their rebellious nature. So from that I gather that the governor, who's that big motherfucker Titan by the way, smashed the wall to allow some Titans in to thin the herd, then sent the rebels, aka the Survey Corps, on a suicide mission to repair the outer wall hoping they would all be wiped out. Okay, that makes sense, but I also get the impression that he wanted the wall to be repaired so as not to let too many Titans in, which could cause the original plan to backfire drastically. So I was a bit lost as to his actual motive. Did he want to repair the wall to maintain power, or keep it broken for population and rebellion control? The only explanation that makes sense to me was that once the Survey Corps were killed, he would go out in his Titan form and fix the wall himself, but even that is a thin explanation. The first 45 minutes or so are pretty dull. I always struggle to justify movies that are split into two parts, and I had a really hard time justifying this one. Attack on Titan could have very easily been a standalone movie that runs for about 2 hours 20. There are some essential scenes in the first 45 minutes, such as Eren's Titan transformation explanation and the Eren interrogation scene, but there was also a lot of waste. The interrogation scene could have been a little shorter and some scenes could have been dropped entirely. I was happy the first 10 or so minutes recapped what happened in part 1 as I'd sort of forgotten exactly what went down, but if this was one movie that would need to be there and they could have used that 10 minutes to take their time with some scenes, which they really needed to do at some points. It's a strange film in that it feels slow and fast at the same time. With the exception of the interrogation scene, the first 45 minutes move from scene to scene quickly, but nothing really happens. So the pacing is fast, but the information flow is slow. It has a really jarring effect and it took me quite a while to get into part 2. But once we have that scene where Shikishima gets his session on and tells Eren about the government and Titan origins, it started to get much more interesting. The genre and tone of part 2 seems drastically different from part 1. The intro to part 1 is basically just extreme gore and horror themes. Part 2 has none of this whatsoever. Part 1 treats the Titans as giant scary monsters that our characters should definitely avoid, sort of like what you see in Cloverfield or other monster flicks. Our characters appear visibly scared of these creatures and the tone of the entire movie is overshadowed by this constant threat of the Titans. Part 2 seems to push the Titans aside when we hear the government plotline. It works because the characters are effective at killing Titans, so they no longer fear them, they needed something else to fear. Because that fear is government oppression, part 2 turns into a sort of political action drama, which is much different from the horror or monster flick style of the first part. This could explain why the movies are in 2 parts, as they're so tonally different, but there's ways to work around that. I'd say that I enjoyed part 2 more than part 1 because of this political standpoint, as well as those sweet Pacific Rim-esque Titan battles between Eren and Shikishima. That shit was wonderful. The only negative from the ending is that there is still no real resolution. Eren and Co succeed in destroying the Mega Titan motherfucker and put an end to his rule over the community. They fix the hole in the wall with a bomb and then all look off into the sunset together. It's a nice ending, but the movie should have had a longer third act. We should have seen the newly liberated people being released from the inner walls and enjoying some true freedom. We could have maybe seen Eren and the remainder of the Survey Corps take control and offer some entrances into the world beyond the wall. The only issue with that is that there is still Titans out there, but that could be dealt with by expanding the Survey Corps. We could see a little montage of them going on skirmishes and cutting down the remaining Titans so that the humans can enjoy the wonders of the world once more. After all, Part 2 is all about regaining freedom and being able to enjoy nature, with specific references to the ocean. So I would have liked to have seen an extended third act where we see just how liberated everyone has become. Now, I had some questions in Part 1 that still weren't answered. For those who forgot or haven't seen my Part 1 review, here's a reminder. Is there any humanity outside the wall? After Part 2, I'm somewhat inclined to believe there is, but I'm still not certain, so this is still unanswered. Where is this city? I'm guessing it's somewhere in Japan, but that could be a total misconception. Are Titans controlled by / born from the people they eat? This is further complicated with Part 2 as we see how the Mega Titans of Shikishima and Eren form. They work as a sort of biological exoskeleton that is controlled by the host, again like in Pacific Rim. Does that mean that the other more common Titans have people inside controlling them? I'm not certain, but I don't think so. I think that the other Titans are literally just giant people, whereas Eren and Shikishima's Titan is the exoskeleton. That's why they can change between human and Titan, and also why they're much rarer. Maybe the serum that Eren's dad injected into him was a more advanced version of the Titan serum that produced the actual desired effects, and not just turned people into giant naked monsters with grinning pedo faces. Shikishima must have been given the same kind of treatment. Maybe you guys can clear some of these questions up, but remember that the film has to explain these things by itself with no prior knowledge, so it's a negative that some of these ideas and aspects of the universe are not properly explained in either part. From a technical standpoint, Attack on Titan Part 2 is still as visually impressive as Part 1. There are some truly wonderful shots to look at. I mean, look at this shot from near the end of the movie. It's gorgeous to look at. I'm also a fan of this shot as it shows how much Hans loves her newly found love. There's some surprisingly good cinematography in both parts, which makes the whole experience that much more enjoyable. I feel that the CGI in Part 2 was improved from Part 1 as well. I imagine they pumped more of the budget into Part 2 as they needed the Eren vs Shikishima Titan fight as well as the fight against Governor Kubel as Mega Bastard. All three Titans looked fantastic and it was a joy to watch them fight with each other. As I mentioned earlier, it was as awesome to watch as Pacific Rim. It's just a shame that the Shikishima and Eren fight didn't last a bit longer. It all seemed to be over a bit too quickly, but maybe they just didn't have enough money to keep it going longer. Who knows? To summarise, I'll say that Attack on Titan Part 1 and Part 2 are not the best movies ever and will certainly piss off a lot of the loyal fans of the anime or manga, but to a filthy casual like me, I found them perfectly enjoyable. Part 2 I think has a much better tone with its political ideas and gives us a much needed connection with our mismatched characters. It hosts some really great fight scenes between Eren and Shikishima, and the movie itself has a voice and message. However, it's heavily let down by its lack of a decent third act, very slow beginning, and its failure to be clear with its ideas and universe. That said, that could be a result of bad subtitles, but I don't think that's the case. Both movies could have quite easily been condensed into one, and I think that if they did that, then the movies would both flow better and would be a lot more clear and concise with the story they're trying to tell. Attack on Titan Part 2 gets 3.5 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.
どっちだ